I used a stroke, incapacitation angle instead of poison, a forged power of attorney instead of a stolen down payment, and a christening, not another wedding, as the public humiliation scene, per the mechanism recommendation, while keeping the calm dad voice, the running envelope mystery, and the legal trap resolution. My daughter-in-law pulled the blanket off my wife's legs in front of 200 guests at my granddaughter's christening, laughing that she wanted everyone to see the real reason Grandma can't dance anymore. And the worst part? My own son laughed right along with her. I did not raise my voice. I did not cause a scene. I walked to the front of that reception hall, knelt down, and covered my wife's legs myself, and then I asked the DJ to stop the music so I could make an announcement. When I opened my folder and read the first line out loud, my daughter-in-law's laughter died in her throat. If you're just joining this story, take a breath, because what happened to my family over the last year still keeps me up some nights. If you've ever had someone mistake your patience for weakness, hit like before we go further, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. It helps me more than you know. My name is Walter Odom. I'm 63 years old, and for 35 years I ran a commercial roofing company out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. I started with a single ladder and a used pickup truck, and I built it into a company that put roofs over 4 state capitals worth of hospitals, schools, and office towers. I sold the business 2 years ago, not because I wanted to retire, because my wife needed me home. Eleanor is 60 years old, and 18 months ago she was in a car accident that crushed 3 vertebrae in her lower back. She survived, and I thank God for that every single morning. But the nerve damage left her legs unreliable. Some days she can walk short distances with a cane. Other days her legs simply stop listening to her, and she needs the wheelchair, or she falls. It happened once in our kitchen, and I heard her hit the floor from the garage. I have never moved that fast in my life. After that, I promised her she would never be alone in that house again, and I meant it. Our son Nathan is 30 years old. I am not going to pretend Nathan was ever the son I imagined when he was small, but I loved him without condition, and I gave him everything I had to give. I paid for his degree in finance. I co-signed his first apartment. When he told us he'd met a woman named Brianna at his firm and that they were serious, Eleanor cried tears of joy in the kitchen, because for the first time in years, Nathan sounded settled, sounded like a man building something instead of drifting. I want to be honest with you. I had a strange feeling about Brianna from the very first dinner. She was polished, beautiful, sharp, quick, with a compliment. But there was something underneath the compliments, something I couldn't name yet. A way she looked at our house, at Eleanor's jewelry, at the framed photo of the company's first job site, like she was doing arithmetic in her head. I told myself I was an old man being suspicious of anyone who got close to my only child. I told myself that for almost 2 years. I was wrong to wait that long to trust my gut, and I'll carry that mistake with me. 6 months before the accident, Nathan and Brianna got married in a small courthouse ceremony, and less than a year later, Eleanor was in that car wreck. I won't pretend the timeline doesn't still haunt me, wondering if things would have gone differently if Nathan had married someone who actually loved this family instead of what this family had built. After the accident, everything in our lives reorganized itself around Eleanor's recovery. I turned our downstairs den into a bedroom so she wouldn't have to face the stairs. I learned how to help her with exercises the physical therapist assigned. I learned which days were good days and which days I needed to cancel everything and just sit with her hand in mine while the pain passed. Nathan visited some Sundays. Brianna came with him exactly twice in that first year, both times for under 20 minutes, both times checking her phone more than she looked at her mother-in-law. Then, about 8 months ago, Nathan called me sounding urgent. He said he and Brianna had found a house, a real house, the kind you settle into for good, in a neighborhood called Brookline Heights on the west side of Tulsa. He said the sellers wanted a fast close, all cash for the down payment to beat out another offer, and he asked if I could help bridge them $220,000 until his annual bonus came through in the spring. He promised he'd pay me back within 4 months. I want you to understand something about me. I am not a man who hands out money easily, not even to my own son. I built what I built by counting every dollar like it mattered, because it did. But Nathan sounded like he was finally becoming a husband, a provider, a man staking a claim in his own life. And God help me, I wanted to believe in that so badly that I wrote the check that same afternoon. 3 months went by. No bonus arrived. No house showing invitation arrived either. Eleanor mentioned one afternoon, almost in passing, that Brianna had posted photographs online from what looked like a rented lake house up in Grand Lake, tagged with location, laughing on a dock with people we'd never met, wearing a bracelet that looked like it cost more than my first truck. I didn't say anything to Eleanor. I simply drove to my bank the next morning and asked to see where that $220,000 had actually gone. My banker, a woman named Sandra Whitfield, who has handled my accounts for over a decade, pulled the wire transfer records without hesitation. The money had never gone to any title company. It had never touched an escrow account at all. It had been wired directly into a joint investment account under Nathan and Brianna's names, and from there, large portions of it had already been withdrawn for what the memo lines described only as personal use, alongside 2 payments to a luxury auto leasing company and 1 payment to a jewelry boutique in downtown Tulsa. I stood in that lobby with the printout in my hand, and something in my chest went cold and very, very quiet. 40 years of reading contracts, reading crews, reading men who tried to shortchange me on materials, and I have never once mistaken the numbers. The numbers told me exactly what my son had let happen to his mother's home security fund. I did not confront him that day. I drove home, and I sat in my car in the driveway for a long time before I went inside, because Eleanor was having a good day, sitting up in her wheelchair by the window with sunlight on her face, and I could not bring that darkness into the room with her. Not yet. About a month later, something else began to trouble me. Brianna had started coming by twice a week to help with Eleanor's care, insisting on managing Eleanor's medications herself, insisting the nurse we'd hired wasn't necessary on the days she visited. She was sweet about it in front of me, always smiling, always saying things like family should take care of family. But Eleanor started telling me, quietly, that she felt foggier on the days Brianna managed her pills, not in pain, just slow, confused. Once she couldn't remember what day it was until almost dinner time. I am not a doctor, but I have run crews on job sites for 35 years, and you learn to notice when something doesn't add up on a schedule. I quietly started counting Eleanor's pills myself after Brianna's visits, comparing them against what the pharmacy log said should be remaining. The numbers were wrong 3 separate times. Not missing. Wrong in the other direction. There were extra doses unaccounted for on the log, more than what had been prescribed. I drove straight to Dr. Marcus Webb, Eleanor's neurologist and a man I've trusted with my wife's life for 2 years now. I told him I needed him to run a full panel on Eleanor's next blood work, off the books if he had to, checking for anything beyond her prescribed medications, and I told him why. Marcus went very still when I explained the pill counts. He said that certain sedatives, layered quietly on top of Eleanor's existing nerve medication, could produce exactly the kind of grogginess and confusion Eleanor had been describing, and that over months, it could also mask or worsen the nerve symptoms in her legs, making her decline look natural when it wasn't. He ran the panel 2 days later under the pretense of a routine check. The results came back, showing trace levels of a sedative that had never been prescribed to my wife. My paternal love for Nathan, whatever illusion of it I'd still been protecting, simply ended in that parking lot, not with rage. With a kind of clean, final grief, like watching a building you spent your whole life constructing quietly collapse into its own foundation. I was not looking at my son and his wife anymore. I was looking at 2 people slowly disassembling my family for money, patient enough to do it 1 small dose at a time. I did not call the police that day, and I want to explain why, because I know some of you watching will want me to. I knew exactly how this would unfold if I did. Brianna would weep for the cameras and claim she'd simply mixed up dosages by accident, caring for a mother-in-law she loved. Nathan would claim he knew nothing, that his wife handled all of it, and he'd cry about being manipulated too. Between a good defense attorney and Eleanor's medical fragility making her an unreliable witness in a courtroom, I watched, in my mind, exactly how many months it would drag on, how many depositions they would force my sick wife to sit through, how easily $220,000 of my own dollars would end up paying the lawyer who got them out of it. I did not want justice that took 2 years and left Eleanor exhausted in a witness chair. I wanted something absolute, something they could not lawyer their way out of, something that would end the very same night it began. I called an old friend, Diane Castellano, a financial attorney who had structured every major contract of my roofing company for 2 decades. I sat in her office and told her everything, The stolen down payment, the joint account, the sedative in my wife's blood work. Diane listened without interrupting, the way she always did before she started building something. When I finished, she asked me one question. She asked how much I was willing to spend to end this completely, in one motion, with no path back for either of them. I told her I didn't care what it cost. I wanted Nathan and Brianna's finances in a position where one signature from me could take away everything they thought they'd stolen. Diane explained that Nathan and Brianna, in their rush to look wealthier than they were, had also taken out a private commercial bridge loan of their own, $700,000, using the Brookline Heights house as collateral, a house it turned out they'd never actually purchased outright. They'd only put a deposit down and then defaulted twice on the loan servicer's terms. The loan was currently held by a small regional lending firm that was, Diane discovered through her contacts, quietly looking to offload distressed debt before the end of the fiscal quarter. Diane spent 6 weeks, patiently, legally, acquiring that defaulted loan through a private holding company we set up together. Until the debt, all $700,000 of it, plus penalties and accrued interest, belonged entirely to me. Nathan and Brianna had no idea their own household finances now answered directly to the father-in-law. Brianna had spent 2 years quietly humiliating. While Diane worked, I said nothing. I smiled at family dinners. I let Brianna keep managing Eleanor's medications, because Marcus and I had quietly switched Eleanor's real prescriptions to a locked box. Only he and I had the combination to, replacing what Brianna handled with harmless placebo capsules she never once suspected weren't real. Eleanor's confusion cleared within 2 weeks. She never knew the reason. I couldn't bring myself to tell her yet. Not until it was over. Not until I could hand her the whole truth already finished instead of still bleeding. The christening was scheduled for a Saturday in June, for Nathan and Brianna's daughter, my granddaughter, Rosalie, at a banquet hall Brianna had insisted on, the kind with a chandelier in the lobby and valet parking. 200 guests. Brianna's whole circle of friends from the country club, business associates from Nathan's firm, family from both sides. I brought the finalized loan documents in a plain manila folder and set them in the car before we left, because I had a feeling, deep in my gut, that Brianna would not be able to help herself that day. I was right. Eleanor was having a difficult week, more tired than usual, her legs weaker, and she needed the wheelchair for the reception. I wheeled her in myself, dressed in her nicest blue dress, her hair done at the salon that morning because she wanted to look beautiful for her granddaughter's day. We found our table near the front, and for the first hour, everything was lovely. Rosalie was passed from arm to arm, cooing under the chandelier light, and Eleanor's whole face lit up every time she got to hold her. Then the DJ called everyone onto the dance floor for a family dance, and Brianna, glowing in a cream-colored dress, pink champagne in her hand, decided this was the moment for a display. She crossed the room toward our table, her heels clicking sharp against the marble, a crowd of her friends trailing behind her with their phones already lifted to record. She stopped in front of Eleanor's wheelchair, tilted her head with a smile I now recognize for exactly what it was, and reached down and yanked the light blanket off Eleanor's lap, the one covering her legs, the one that hid the brace she wore some days when the nerve pain flared. She held it up like a trophy and announced, loud enough for half the hall to hear, that she just wanted everyone to see the real reason Grandma can't dance at her own granddaughter's party. Some of her friends laughed. A few gasped. And my son, my own son, standing right beside her, let out a short, uncomfortable laugh of his own before he even looked over to see my face. I did not shout. I did not grab that blanket back the way every muscle in my body wanted to. I walked forward, slow and steady, the whole hall watching me now instead of Brianna, and I knelt down in front of my wife. I picked the blanket up off the floor where Brianna had let it fall, and I laid it gently back over Eleanor's legs myself, tucking the edges in the way I'd learned to do 100 times at home. I looked at Eleanor's face, and she was doing what she always does, holding her chin up, refusing to let them see her break. I told her, quiet enough for only her to hear, that it was almost over now, that she never had to endure another single day of this. Then I stood up, walked to where the DJ was standing frozen behind his equipment, and asked him, politely, to cut the music for just a few minutes. I told him I had something to say to my son and daughter-in-law, and to the family gathered here to celebrate my granddaughter. The music stopped. 200 faces turned toward me. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the manila folder I'd been carrying since we left the house that morning. I told the room I was sorry to interrupt Rosalie's christening, that this baby girl deserved nothing but joy today, and that I would keep this brief, because it belonged to her parents, not to her. I looked directly at Brianna, whose smile had already started to falter the moment she saw the folder in my hand, some instinct in her recognizing that this was not a proud father's toast. I opened the folder and read the first line out loud. Notice of default. Demand for immediate repayment in full. $700,000, plus accrued interest and penalties, owed to the holder of record. I watched Brianna's face change in real time, the champagne glass trembling slightly in her hand as she scanned the page I handed her, her eyes catching on the section marked Current Holder of Note, and then catching on the name printed clearly beneath it, my name. I told the room, calm as I've ever spoken in my life, that 6 weeks ago I had legally acquired the defaulted loan on the house they had never actually finished purchasing, the house whose down payment had been funded, in part, with $220,000. I had wired my son under the belief it was for an honest home for my family, money that instead paid for a leased car, a bracelet, and a lake house getaway. I told them that as of this morning, I held the note in full, and that I was calling it due, in its entirety, effective immediately. Brianna's hand went to her mouth. Nathan grabbed the paper from her, his eyes tearing across the same lines, his face draining of color the way I imagine mine had in that bank lobby months earlier. I was not finished. I told the room that I had also, 2 weeks prior, given a full statement, and Dr. Webb's toxicology report to the Tulsa County District Attorney's Office regarding the unauthorized sedative found in my wife's blood work, sourced back to prescriptions filled under Brianna's name at a pharmacy across town. I told them that detectives were already aware of today's location, in case a certain party attempted to leave the state before their scheduled interview Monday morning. 2 men in plain suits who had been standing quietly near the coat check for the last 20 minutes, men I had arranged through Diane's contact at the district attorney's office to simply observe, not to make a scene, stepped forward at that moment, not dragging anyone in handcuffs in front of a christening full of children, but calmly informing Brianna that she was being asked to accompany them for questioning and that her attorney could meet them at the station. Brianna did not go quietly. She screamed that this was insane, that I had planted evidence, that I was a bitter old man trying to destroy her marriage out of jealousy, all while 200 people, including her own mother, stood frozen watching her get walked out of her daughter's christening by investigators. Nathan did not follow her out. He turned to me instead, and for one moment I saw something in his face I hadn't seen in years, something like the boy he used to be before money and Brianna reshaped him. He asked me, voice cracking, what was going to happen to him now, to the house, to Rosalie. I told him the truth. I told him the loan was due in full, and that if he could not pay it, everything tied to that house would be seized, exactly as the documents stated, and I would not be softening that consequence for him, not this time. I told him that I loved my granddaughter more than I could put into words, and that I would always be there for Rosalie, but that a man who stood beside his wife and laughed while she humiliated his own disabled mother, a man who let his mother be quietly medicated into confusion in her own home without ever once asking why she seemed different, had shown me exactly who he'd chosen to become. I told him he was welcome to earn his way back into being my son again, but that it would take years, not an apology in a banquet hall. Rosalie stayed with us that night, and for the following several months while the legal proceedings unfolded around her parents, she stayed with us far more nights than not. Eleanor held that little girl every single evening on the porch, and I watched something heal in my wife's face that had nothing to do with her legs. Brianna was formally charged 3 weeks later, and given the toxicology evidence and the financial records Diane had compiled, she took a plea agreement rather than risk trial, avoiding years in prison in exchange for restitution and a lengthy probation, with a permanent restraining order keeping her away from Eleanor. Nathan was never charged criminally. The DA determined he genuinely hadn't known about the sedatives, but the $700,000 debt was very real, and it broke him financially in a way I did not soften. He lost the house entirely. He moved into a small apartment across town, sold the car, sold the jewelry Brianna had never returned, and started, slowly, showing up. He calls me every single Sunday now. Some weeks I still can't bring myself to feel much when I hear his voice. Other weeks, when he asks about Eleanor's physical therapy without me prompting him, or when he shows up unannounced, just to sit with his mother for an hour, I feel something soften in my chest that I thought had died completely in that hospital parking lot. I don't know yet if Nathan will ever fully become the son I once believed he was. I know that Rosalie will grow up surrounded by grandparents who adore her, regardless of what her parents do with the rest of their lives. Eleanor's legs have not improved much, if I'm honest with you. Some days are still very hard, but her mind is sharp again, clear as it was before any of this began. And some mornings I catch her laughing at something on the television, all the way from the kitchen, and I stand there in the doorway just listening to it, because for a while I wasn't sure I'd get to hear that sound again. Family is supposed to be the one place you're safe from being used. When the people closest to you start treating your love like a resource to extract instead of a bond to protect, you are allowed to stop calling that love and start calling it what it actually is. Protecting the people who truly care for you sometimes means becoming someone you never wanted to be, calm and immovable, and completely unwilling to negotiate with cruelty. It is not bitterness. It is what's left of love once it finally sees clearly. If this story reached you, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss what we share next. And if you've ever had to protect someone you love from the people who were supposed to love them too, tell me about it in the comments below. I read every single one of them. Thank you for staying with me tonight. Real love never keeps score, and it never needs an audience to prove itself. Sometimes the softest hearts have to grow the steadiest hands, not to punish, but to protect what still matters. If someone tries to make you small, stand up quietly, tuck the blanket back in, and keep loving the people worth loving. That kind of calm can outlast any storm. A small note for you. This story was written and fictionalized by AI purely for entertainment, though we hope its life lessons still brought something warm and real to you.